Okay, so we're gonna add collisions into our game. And I've gone ahead and I've already added this sprite and I've made it in Game Maker Studio, just like a red square. And I've assigned it to an object just called object wall collide. And I gave it its own instance layer just below the kiwi, and then placed it around the room. So if you are on the laptop mode, let me look. There's a way you might want to disable the laptop mode under input, general settings, input, uncheck forced laptop mode. Let's close that out, because that's going to be able to allow you to place this wall in the instance in this sort of like painterly, like clicking and dragging throughout. So normally you could just click, drag, place, but if we hold Option or Alt while this object is active, we can drag them across the world. So let's go ahead and just put an invisible barrier right there. I'm gonna go in, I think what I'll do, I'll just build a little house right there. Or, yeah, we'll just build a pretend house. So that's gonna be somewhere that the kiwi cannot move. And what that looks like is essentially this object is stopping me from moving forward. And it does get a little tricky. Just a couple of things to note is in this, in this little space here, you know, consider if you have tight walls, maybe expanding them out so you have a lot of movement, or a lot of wiggle room so your character doesn't get stuck between these corners. Let's go in to wall. So I can just go ahead and like move that out, or I could scale it down. That way that kiwi doesn't get stuck right around here. Okay, so we've made our sprite, we've made our object, we've placed it in the world, but now we want, like, obviously this isn't visible when I play my game or demo my game, right? We're not seeing those red squares. There's a couple things we have to do in our workspace. So make sure your kiwi object is open and make sure your wall collision is open. First thing we want to do is make sure we have in the sprite of the wall, we want to make sure we have a collision mask. And because it's just a square, I did automatic. You could do full image, and you could do manual and even drag out these borders even more to give yourself sort of like more of a, like you can't get too close to it. And then I chose rectangle with rotation, and we're good to go. So sprite is good, all set. I unchecked visible. That way, even though it's visible here in my IDE, it's not visible when I run my game. I also checked solid and made sure my collision mask is the same as sprite. That should be by default. So moving up here, I have my kiwi sprite, which we'll get into the kiwi object in just a second, but I also give my kiwi sprite a collision mask. and I assigned it manually with a ellipse. And I can move that around sort of wherever I want. I didn't want it to cover the entire kiwi, so that way maybe, you know, his body, like realistically you could see his body maybe going above this water where his feet are still on the land. You'll have to play with this. Everyone's character, of course, is going to be different, shaped a little bit differently, so play around with this. You can use any of these shapes. You could do the full image, but I recommend either in ellipse or a diamond. I'm going to do like precise too, but let's change that back. All right, so sprite all set. Now for the sort of complicated part, or not complicated, but there's quite a bit to do here. From our first video, I think we did, when we assigned the keyboard commands, we have that move speed set to 4. You don't have to just ignore this one. I could delete it, but I'm just gonna, don't worry about the second variable here. We just need to make sure we have move speed, which you should already have if you've included the keyboard commands on your character already. We have that begin step where the kiwi is assigned the idle sprite. And then of course we have the keyboard left, up, down, left, up, right, and down. So the new events, and they'll order themselves. You're not ordering this. The game IDE will order this for you. So you just can go ahead and do add event, and we're going to add 1, 2, 3 more events. So let's start with the first event we're adding. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. If I can. Great. So we are declaring temporary variables for our keyboard commands. So you can screenshot this if you'd like, but we have a variable declare temp, or declare temporary variable for our right, left, up, down, x input, and y input. So right is going to be the value of keyboard underscore check, open parentheses, vk underscore right, close parentheses, and you'll do that with the same way with left, up, and down. Then we have two temporary variables, x input and y input, and you're going to title this x input value right space minus space left. And then with y, because remember y is up and down, x is left and right, down minus up. And then we're going to add a move and collide. So remember, you can search these commands and then just drag them in, and then fill them out. So move and collide is going to be object, wall, collide, x, x input, asterisk, move underscore speed, and then the same thing for the y input. We're not going to change iterations or the offsets. And then we're going to change max x movements to 0 and 0. I will show you how to make, so we're just making a solid wall. I also want to show you how to make a wall that slows down your character. So imagine if they were going through like a swamp or mud, something that's like slowing their steps down. We'll talk about that next. So step is done. And again, you can make it real big. If you want to screenshot it, that should be everything. Okay, so the next new event we're going to make is add event, collision, objects. Select that wall. So then we're going to add jump to point. Remember, we can add that in. And I have x previous for my x and y previous for my y. This could also be -1 or 0. They can both be -1s with relative selected. But for this wall demo, this is what my values I'm using. And then lastly, I'm adding an intersect boundary. So that is other intersect boundary. And I have another jump to point, x previous, y previous. This intersect boundary is so Kiwi does not, let's delete a couple of these. Kiwi does not go off the map. So let's go ahead and play that. Oh, actually, let me right click and just disable it temporarily. So you'll notice your character can go completely off the map. Like there's nothing up there. Let's go back and enable that. So the step, which we have all this, these new temporary variables, we have the collision with that object, and then we have that intersect boundary event for the Kiwi. So next thing I want to do is, let's imagine these are like swamps. We're just gonna pretend. I'm gonna go down. I'm going to change this to not solid. And I'm going to do movement. Let's go -1. -1. So you can see I can still walk over it, but it's kind of difficult. So this could be used, you know, if you're making sort of things that you need to overcome in your world. And we can play with those variables a little bit more too. Try that out. And it does kind of throw your character around. So that's like definitely something you might want to try out. What is your environment like? What are the challenges that your character has to get through to get to the end? So, all right, cool.